This would normally be the time of year we all get together to share food and company, but with that off the table for obvious reasons, we figured maybe we'd take a moment to look at all the times that's happened on screen. So these are our picks, the 10 best meal scenes of all time. First up, we're looking at the classic awkward meal. It's not going great and nobody is talking about it. This is a lunch of peculiar proclivities in The Breakfast Club, Easter at Annie's in Annie Hall, milking cats in Meet the Parents, meeting the parents in Eraserhead and the recent I'm Thinking of Ending Things, meeting the girlfriend in Lars and the Real Girl, and sitting there painfully, silently squished between your boyfriend's parents at a dinner you didn't want to go to in 4 months, 3 weeks, and 2 days.
Dragă, în familia asta e foarte greu să stai în bucătărie. Azi de vină nu mânca porc. Dacă vedea grăsimea în farfurie, oricât de mică era, nu mai mânca.
Valentina al meu tot la fel.
Și în supă, dacă vedea că se stricoară o steluță de grăsime, ceva, gata, nu mai mânca. La fel pielița de la pui.
Știi că pielița nici eu nu mănânc, aia îngrașă.
If you look at all these awkward meals together, it starts to become clear that it's not about how everyone's saying the wrong things, but about how nobody's saying the right things. And in 4 months, 3 weeks, and 2 days, for 7.5 unbroken minutes, that couldn't be more clear. The conversation is pleasant, polite, but it keeps flying right by the truth of the matter that's sitting right in the middle of the screen. Something isn't right, and the act of flinging insubstantive words across the frame at each other in light of it starts to become practically painful. The scene, by forcing us to stare at the discomfort in a oneer and not engage with the liveliness, captures an unmistakable sense of aloneness, even in a crowded, lively room, that anyone who's ever been to a party and yet still felt a million miles away will immediately understand. Beyond just uncomfortable elephants in the room, there is a vast swath of brilliant meal scenes entirely structured around all different forms of what isn't being said. Take the Unspoken Secrets scene, where someone knows something that the others don't, and they all circle around the truth like pushing peas on a plate. Hilariously in The Birdcage in Mrs. Doubtfire, and so very disturbingly in Hannibal, they put it together in the Mood for Love, and he gives it away in Unbreakable. It comes to murder in Titus and jokes about murder in Goodfellas. But for our favorite exploration of unspoken secrets, we gotta turn to Inglourious Basterds. But not that one. No, it is Shoshana's lunch with Joseph Goebbels that takes the strudel, cake.
Mademoiselle, permettez-moi de vous interrompre. Ceci est une simple formalité. Aucune raison de vous inquiéter. Ah, veuillez m'excuser, j'ai oublié de commander la crème. Un instant. Attendez la crème.
What starts as a decently tense scene where the hero, Shoshana, quietly and with little difficulty conceals her Jewish ancestry and fake identity despite Private Solar's infatuation with her, turns into something else entirely upon Colonel Landa's arrival. We know him to be an unbelievably sharp and perceptive interrogator, so the stakes ratchet up immediately. And then something even more interesting happens. The secret that seems to swim beneath the surface shifts from the fact that Shoshana is concealing her identity to the fact that Landa knows she's concealing her identity. And although neither she nor us can be too sure, we all collectively squirm with suspense at the realization that we have lost our grip on the conversation beneath the conversation. Sometimes the secret is that one of the characters loves the other. Even better when they both love each other and do that wonderful little dance where they bashfully tiptoe towards admitting it. Nocturnal Animals has a highly underrated example of this, while When Harry Met Sally has probably the most famous of them. Pulp Fiction plays with the danger of forbidden attraction, while Tom Jones hilariously uses food to express sexual desire in a way that really strains the idea of subtext to its limits. Citizen Kane is the exact opposite of this, and Lady and the Tramp has the most iconic moment of undercover romance expressed through its food. But for our third pick, we gotta go with the exceptional diner scene from 2016's Moonlight.
That's what it is. Bullshit, man. That ain't what it is. That ain't you, Sharon. You don't know me. I don't know you.
Chiron travels back to Miami to see Kevin, his childhood love, for the first time in a decade. Kevin cooks, Chiron eats, and then they catch up, but their mutual attraction is never quite far from the table. You can see love and bravado and shame and vulnerability flit across their faces as they attempt to navigate a history neither of them have the words or the courage for. They dash between hope and disappointment, the real dialogue exchanged in looks and blocking until Kevin puts on a song and it finishes their conversation for them. Sometimes the unspoken subtext is more of a conflict, a disagreement that gets played out and worked out without being directly addressed. This is family control in the guise of dinner table politics in American History X, marital resentment in Revolutionary Road, disillusionment in Before Midnight, and fear of the unknown in Signs. But for our number 7 pick, we think there's something absolutely incredible about the silent renegotiation of a relationship contract in the climactic dinner of Phantom Thread.
You're not going to die. You might wish you're going to die, but you're not going to. You need to settle down a little.
Phantom Thread is chock full of spectacular dining scenes, from the cold, quiet breakfasts to the fiery dinner arguments. But there's nothing quite so incredible as the moment where, after having secretly poisoned Woodcock and finding that they both enjoyed the relationship dynamic much more afterwards, she poisons his dinner in front of him, and then he willingly eats it. The scene is an incredibly tense game of chicken, and navigated almost entirely through nonverbal cues. The way she pours the water, the way he chews the food, his decision to swallow. Each tiny gesture has meaning, consequences, and above all, they matter. And sometimes the unspoken subtext of a meal is really just about power, and without ever directly addressing that fact, the conversation is a proxy battle about it. This is the final dinner in The Cook, the Thief, His Wife, and Her Lover, a terrible Thanksgiving in Scent of a Woman, a hilarious conversation about menstruation in 20th Century Women, the big first meal in August Osage County, every single meal in The Lighthouse, and our number 6 pick, the uninvited breakfast in the German house the division is occupying in Fury.
Offer the girl her plate. There you go. Oops.
Hang on there. We'll fix that for you. Let me just fix this for you real quick. I didn't touch it.
When the rest of the men barge in mid-breakfast, accusing Don and Norman of playing house and not inviting them, drunk, angry, and with something to prove, the meal quickly becomes a dangerous battlefield on which the men try to undermine, humiliate, and sabotage the two of them while maintaining plausible deniability that that's what they're doing. In the process, everything but weapons becomes a weapon. The food, the way they take up space, especially the two women in the house. The tendency for occupying forces to commit heinous war crimes is never far from the viewer's minds, which really expands the cruel possibilities of how bad the unspoken really could be. Conflict can't always stay below the surface, though. Sometimes the unspoken has to boil over into the open, and frankly, it can be kind of a relief when it does. Like in the asparagus dinner of American Beauty, or the spaghetti dinner of 10 Cloverfield Lane, or the steak dinner gone wrong of Raging Bull, or the piece of toast that just wouldn't come in 5 easy pieces, or the traumatic reckoning in Hereditary. Feston's speech of truth is a brutal surfacing of something everyone perversely wishes would stay unspoken. But for our 5th pick, it's gotta be the dinner parlay with Salazzo of Godfather. We don't want to spend too much on this scene because we've already done a whole Brilliant Moments segment on it, which you should definitely check out, but it's just too fantastic to leave off the list. It's filled with secrets, suspense, power negotiation, the kinds of empty niceties concealing serious threats that make for all the best meal scenes, and then a misdirect, a massive train wheel screeching crescendo and an explosion of everything previously unsaid unleashed upon Salazzo and his crony. Sometimes the conflict is right out there in the open, and the dinner table becomes the venue for some good old-fashioned competition. This is Andrew dunking on his cousins in Whiplash, and it's Bluto starting a food fight in Animal House. If De Niro and Pacino had ordered a goddamn pastry to go with their coffee and Heat, we probably would have picked that. But we don't feel too bad about it because we get to talk about the insult game in Hook instead.
Substitute chemistry teacher?
Come on, Rufio, hit him back. Mung tongue.
Math tutor?
Pinhead.
Prison barber?
Mother lover.
Nearsighted gynecologist?
In your face, camel cake.
In your rear, cow derriere?
Lying, crying, spying, prying, ultra pig.
You lewd, crude, rude, bag of pre-chewed food dude?
Hook's dinner scene is filled with enough hilarious, creative brilliance for 2 whole excellent meal scenes, dividing into teams and hurling ever more ridiculous, childish insults at each other with oohs and ahs and bangarangs as Peter relearns how to tap into his playfulness is, on its own, fantastic. But do that over a meal of play pretend food that magically transforms into a ridiculous multicolored feast with the power of belief over one of the more fantastically surprising uses of a simple cut found in modern film, and you've got the makings of a classic. The writing brilliantly captures childhood humor, the energy finds the perfect balance of love and aggression, and the food fight that emerges is one of the best ever on screen. Sometimes a cinematic meal is less about any specific conflict or plot movement and more about painting a picture of how a group of people relates. Call this the family portrait meal. You see it in the opening of Little Miss Sunshine, across the length of Eat, Drink, Man, Woman, Soul Food, and The Big Chill, at Thanksgiving in Avalon, but never more marvelously than in the Christmas feast of Fanny and Alexander. Nowhere on film has the sprawling, intergenerational dynamic of a family been better mapped through time than in Fanny and Alexander, and Christmas Dinner sees all the disparate threads finally come together into one room all at once, a togetherness that the rest of the film will see the family struggling to recapture and will not be repeated until its very end. And it's got a little bit of everything. Song, cheer, intergenerational disconnect, substance problems, class struggle, creepy uncles, the shadow of trauma, all swirling around one massive dinner table. It's a snapshot of one unique family with all their lovingly cataloged peculiarities, handled with such specificity that it almost starts to feel universal. The people in our lives are all idiosyncratic in their own ways, but Bergman's characters are exactly the same amount of idiosyncratic, which somehow makes it feel like he's actually kind of captured all of them. Sometimes simple meals can be about even less than the family. Sometimes they're just about the joy of conversation over a bite to eat. Diner delights in many of these moments, while Reservoir Dogs prologues with one. My Dinner with Andre is an entire film about 2 people just eating and talking, while Coffee and Cigarettes follows a bunch of vignettes, admittedly over more beverage than food. But if it's just eating and talking they'll be doing, there's no one we'd rather watch at it than Steve Coogan and Rob Brydon, like they did in their very first meal of the trip.
I've not heard your Michael Caine, but I assume it would be something along the lines of, "My name's Michael Caine."
That is where you are so wrong. And you can look at my live video for proof, because that's the very thing I don't do. I say that he used to talk like that.
Do you, Michael Caine?
Okay. I say Michael Caine used to talk like this in the 1960s, right? But that has changed. And I say that over the years, Michael's voice has come down several octaves. Let me finish. And all of the cigars and the brandy don't let me finish. It can now be heard.
Okay.
I've not finished.
Real-life actors play themselves, traveling around the north of England, eating and vaguely competing with each other as old friends do, mostly over who does better impressions. It's just 2 very entertaining friends bullshitting, and it's never better in its pointlessness than when they bring out their dueling canes. But there are no stakes beyond ego, no ends other than the competition itself, no judges other than each other, and one gets the sense that they do it more to fill the time, amuse themselves, and bond than to actually win. And finally, we turn to the rarest movie meal of them all, the one that's seriously just about what's on the plate, where cinema makes our mouths water and stomachs growl, where we spend all our attention delighting in the food, in Ratatouille, in Like Water for Chocolate, in The Big Night, in I Am Love, beautifully in The Lunchbox, miserably in The Turin Horse, hilariously in Tampopo, sensually in 9.5 Weeks, but never more magically with more delight than the titular meal of Babette's feast.
Det här är ju Blinis demidoff. Det här är bestämt Veuve Clicquot 1860.
Ja. Jeg tror bestemt, vi får sne hele dagen i morgen.
When Babette, a refugee from Paris, having been taken in by a deeply religious family and having earned their trust, wins the lottery for enough money to return her to her former life, she chooses instead to secretly spend all of it on one lavish meal for the congregation in a massive act of thanks. However, when the Protestants notice the opulence of the ingredients she begins importing, they decide, in keeping with scripture, that it would be sinful to enjoy such earthly pleasures. So, while they attend the meal to humor her, they all agree not to speak of the food or any enjoyment thereof. And so, the meal begins. Babette laboring in the kitchen, making the most marvelous dishes these quaint Quakers would ever taste, and them pretending not to do so, all except their special guest, the General. And as the Holy Rollers try to deflect their delight with bland religious anecdotes, the General pronounces his pleasure with ever greater eloquence, shocked at their nonchalance until sensation wins the day, and no one can any longer resist what we think is the best movie meal of all time. So what do you think? Disagree with any of our picks? Did we leave out any of your favorite meals? Let us know in the comments below and be sure to subscribe for more CineFix movie lists.